This is Paulette Downey, and I have a message from the Lord. And today's message is it's a matter of perspective. So, when we are going through trials and tribulations, when we are going through difficulties, how you come out of the situation is all a matter of how we look at it. So if we take it in a negative way, then it's going to go in a negative path. And if we take it in a positive way, the end result will be positive. I am going to start off. I was going to start off. Maybe I have a couple of scripture for this. Because really it is a mindset and how we think. But I think how I'm going to start this is I'm going to talk about myself. A lot of this I'm going to be using myself. I find I can use myself as the best example for these situations simply because I know myself. Sometimes, of course, I can talk about other people in other situations, things that they've shared with me and whatnot. This one, okay, how I'm going to start this one is like if you are thinking negatively, like if you're constantly you're thinking negative, then that can be very draining, and it is going to go in one way. And actually, I was going to use this example of myself, but I'm not. I'm going to use another example of myself later, which I had planned to use that one anyway. But I am thinking about this man that I worked with in the beauty industry, and so I worked with him, and he worked with me, and he is gay, and so when he first started working at our store, the store that I worked at, of course he was trying to build a clientele, and some of the women didn't want to be served by him because he was a man, and some of them didn't want to be served by him because he was a man and he was gay. And so one lady came in, and he went up to her to help her, and she kind of brushed him off, and she let him know that she wanted me. Like she kind of let him know that she wanted to be served by me. So when she came to me, she said she was basically uncomfortable being served by him, and I let her know that he was well trained, and that he was experienced at what he did, what he does, and that he was able to help her just as well as I could. But she said, I don't want him serving me. I don't like the fact of a man serving me. I don't think that he should be, serving me. I am uncomfortable. I can understand, she being, like from a point of a woman, maybe not being uncomfortable with a man, but her reasons were not simply that. It was because he was gay, and she just didn't like the lifestyle that he lived. And so, but I let her know that he was fully able, he was fully capable to help her, and he was good at what he did. And she refused. She refused. She said no, she didn't want to be served by him. And after she left, me and this man, we talked about it, and he told me that he had encountered that a few times, but he didn't let those encounters that he had experienced, those bad experiences, he didn't let that deter him in any way. He just kept on plugging along, building his clientele. Well, let me tell you, he was like the pop star of the beauty boutique. Like he became probably the most sought after beauty consultant out of all of us. So even though negative things were being said about him, even though there were women who did not want to be served by him, or people who did not want to be served by him, or people who looked down on him, he still did not let those comments affect how he moved and what he thought about himself. So, like I said, he became like the pop star of the entire beauty boutique. I mean, like, everyone was asking for, where is he? Where is that? Like, they always wanted him, because he built his clientele based on people who accepted him for who he was, and he didn't let that deter him. And now at another location, there was a gentleman who was also gay, and he worked at that location. So a beauty boutique, just like the beauty boutique I worked at. And I didn't work at this one. Somebody else worked at this one, and she was telling me that the gentleman there was experiencing similar. Had similar experiences as the gentleman who worked at my boutique. And she said he was so depressed because of it. So he was very depressed. Like, he found, building a clientele very difficult, simply because of the discrimination that he was facing with the clientele that were coming to that store. And she said he didn't know what to do, and she said he was crying and he was sobbing, and like, he was thinking about possibly, like, just leaving his job and everything like that. And he was saying, like, he can't believe that this kind of discrimination existed. And he just continued, like, every time that he faced that, he just continued to dwell on the experience that he was having. So because of how he handled it, he was unable to build a clientele, because he looked at it in such a negative way. Like, he just looked at the offenses that were coming at him, or the resistance that was coming at him. He just couldn't handle it. And so I explained to her about the gentleman at our location and how he was handling it. And then she said, my goodness, like, what a difference. And so really it is a matter of perspective, of how you deal with situations, that will determine how you come out of things, how you look out, how you look at life in general. So it is all mindset. I'm going to read something here from Romans, and I'm going to read, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to read. It's 8:6-8. So the mind governed by flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind governed by flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's laws, nor can it do so. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God. So if your mind, I mean, neither of these gentlemen are Christians, but I am taking this in a Christian realm. I just wanted to kind of open it with, when something is thrown at you, it can, both people can have eggs thrown in their face, and one just wipe it off and keep moving, and the other one crying, screaming, going on and stop and say I can't. So I just wanted to present that illustration to you before I move forward with this, from a perspective of God. And when we are faced with trials, when we are faced with tribulations, how we handle them depends on how our outcome goes. So this is basically a mindset, like, that we basically have to put on. And so in order to get the mindset of God, of course, we have to constantly be taking in the Bible, reading the scripture, reading the word, and praying, because that's the only way where we are going to learn about the principles of God, and be able to take them from head to heart, and actually walk this out and live this out. And then prayer also, because, like, through prayer, God, like, when you speak to God about things, he does respond. He really does respond. But it has to be continuous. And so that's what I wanted to open with that. So I am gonna use myself as an example, as I talk about mindset and everything, and how depending on how we take things, because at the end of the day, like if you're living a life for Christ, if your life is lived for Christ, then you really do die to yourself. You die to your selfish needs. You die to your wants. You die to everything that you want, and you replace it with everything that God wants you to execute. Or God wants to execute using you as a vessel. So I'll start off with this. I myself, I'm not saying I was always positive, but I'm just talking about life here in general. I grew up with my mom, and my parents, they divorced when I was very young, and so my father is of Caribbean descent. Um, so they divorced when I was about 6 years old. I grew up with my mom. My mom is Canadian, and she's Canadian Black, and so she grew up um, in the East Coast, in the East Coast of Canada, and she's Canadian Black, like her heritage. She's Canadian. She's Canadian. So she grew up in Canada. She's Canadian. My dad is from the Caribbean, but because my parents divorced, I didn't grow up with my father, so I don't have any kind of West Indian influence. The only kind of West Indian influence I have is, aside from how I look, is the influence that I learned from people, like growing up with, people, like West Indian people at school, or, the things around me but basically at school, through restaurants and whatnot. So that's the only influence I had. I don't get me wrong, I have spent some time with my father, but not really enough to get the influence of the culture. I can't speak the patois. I do understand the culture. I do know the culture, quite a bit. I do know the culture, but not to the point where it's in me, not to the point where I grew up with it in me. My mom has the culture, on the other hand. My mom kept us away from our family. So we did not grow up around our family. So it's not like we spent weekends with the aunts and with the uncles or anything like that. My mom really, she cut herself off from her family. So it was just her and us. And, like sometimes she would have, the family would come over, and, we'd get to, see what they were like that way. But other than that, my mom cut us off. So although I know the nuances, of course I know the nuances of being, Black. I know that because I grew up with her, but also because we did have the family, they would come over and visit every now and then, and so I did get to, see them and speak with them and whatnot, but not enough that I really would have that kind of culture brought up in me. So going to school now, I would see, there were a few people like me, a few people my color, but there weren't a lot of people my color. And it was in the 70s, and so there weren't a lot of people my color back in the 70s in Canada. There were Black people in Canada. There were a lot. I grew up in Toronto, so the capital of Canada, or the capital of Ontario, and the the financial hub of Canada. But in school, of course, there were more of other colors. We had all colors. Toronto is much like New York, where we have lots of different ethnicities, lots of different, cultures. More now than then, but still enough then. So I was brought up around different people, and although even though there were people like me, I didn't hang out with those people. Those people weren't my friends. Then growing up as a teenager, I never like I never fit in with the black group, um, who they were predominantly West Indian, because I didn't grow up with that. So I didn't grow up with that kind of West Indian influence. So I didn't fit into that group. The Canadian Blacks in Toronto, there's not many of them, but even with the Canadian Blacks, I didn't fit in with that group, even though, like I knew the nuances, but again, I didn't speak, although, like my mom had. She did have that kind of slang, and I could go into it, but not really deep. I would normally just do it with her. She was my comfort level. She's my mom, so I would, speak with her, but really with anyone else, it just really wasn't there. So even with the Canadian Blacks, I didn't really fit in with them simply because, again, I wasn't around them enough. So I was a misfit. I was a misfit, and and it was interesting because I was insecure, but I was comfortable with myself, and I don't even know how that even works. I was never one who wanted to be someone else. Like I was always happy being me, but I was insecure because I just, I didn't belong anywhere. So, like I hung out with misfits. I was a misfit and I hung out with misfits. And I always, wanted to know, like, why, like, why was I made like this? Like, why was I made to not really fit in anywhere? Like, like there's, no pay, no, I just did not fit in. And I always wondered about that. And I always, like I would say, like to God, like, like, why am I like this? Like, why am I so different? And so, yeah, why? So as like I was a Christian, I started to follow the Lord and everything like that, and but there was still that question as to, okay, like I just don't quite fit in anywhere. But as I'm getting older and everything, like at the time, you don't understand why, and especially when you're younger, you don't know why, why is this, why is that, why. But as I got older, and so like as I'm going to college, and it seemed like everything for me, like whatever program I was in, it was always maybe me and one other black, and then everyone else would be whatever else, but it would never be. And like of course I would never hang out with, like we would never hang out with each other. I was always hanging out with someone of a different race. So it was always that, like whatever program I was in, it was always where I was probably the one or the two in the program, and then everyone else was like a different race from me. And so always different, always placed in those kind of situations. And like I said, the friends, I think through the course of my life, I probably had like one really good black friend. And she was West Indian culture, but she kind of like she was kind of like a misfit too. And so we were friends. We were friends for a long time, and we just drifted. But so okay, so there is a point, and there is, because I'm saying it's all a matter of perspective. I'm taking this somewhere. This is going to actually go deeper, because I really want to make a point about being one mind with God. So as I grew up, like I said, my good friends tend to be of other races, simply because, and they tend to be misfits like me. And I'm very happy being a misfit. I'm very happy that I don't like I'm not the popular one, or I'm not the one that fits in with the group of everybody else, and that I'm very happy being just a misfit. And because there's privilege in being a misfit, there's a lot of good in being a misfit. But anyway, so as I was, like I said, when I grew up, and I started, like I kind of like began to see the power in that, because being, and I know that was how God shaped me. I know that was how God wanted me, because like even in the workforce, like of course, and in the workforce, like there would always be a few blacks, and in the workforce, even though we didn't hang out, but I would connect with them, like because you're adults, more mature, so I could connect with them, but then I connected with other people too. So it wasn't, just blacks. I was connecting with whites and Chinese. Like I connected with people who were fits for me, the right fit for me, so to speak. But what I saw happening at this kind of level, like as I was growing, was because I did not fit in anywhere. My ability to be able to have conversations with people, and to be able to take in information became more open. So like I wasn't tied to a race, I wasn't tied to a people, I wasn't tied there wasn't anything I was tied to. So I didn't like, I came at things in a more, like, how could I put it? I could be more honest, I could be more blunt, I could be. And so, because of that, I was able to have conversations with people, because how I looked at things, it wasn't shaped like, if it wasn't shaped like, say, how can I put it? Like when I, growing up, how can did I experience racism growing up? Probably yes, in the 70s and 80s, probably a lot more so than now. But could I say 50%? No, I can't say even back then it was 50% or 25%, but it would have been a lot more than now. But my whole point is that it allowed me to not adopt a certain kind of thinking. So when I can have conversations with people, and I can have conversations, like conversations about race relations, or conversations, I was able to connect with people. People were able to connect with me because they could feel comfortable with me, because I understood cultures. I wasn't tied to just one sect. I was able to navigate. I was easy. I was comfortable dealing with people of all races, because that's how I grew up. I grew up in an environment of people with all races. And so, because I grew up that way, and because I learned about different cultures and different people and how they did things, then I didn't have those biases, because I was already exposed at a young age. So I knew how, different cultures lived, and how different cultures think, and everything. So growing up into that, and growing into that, allowed me to be able to see people how they really are. And I think because of the way I grew up, I think because of the fact that I didn't fit into any group, because I didn't fit into any culture, that when certain negative things were to come at me, I could honestly assess it and say, okay, well, this is happening to me because she is miserable, and she is just a miserable person. And what she does to me, she does to everyone. She's a miserable person. because there are some people in the world who are simply miserable. And so they will treat you a certain way because they are miserable, not because they may dislike you, not be it because of who you are, be it because of the color of your skin, but they're simply miserable people. There are people like that, and there are people who have been miserable to me for the only reason is because they are miserable. There have been people who have not treated me nicely because they were jealous. They were jealous of, say, of my education and of certain attributes and skills that I had and they didn't have. So then there is that sect who are jealous. And there were people who just didn't like me. Not again because of my color, but they just didn't like me. And then, yes, there were a few, not, and I'm not so much in the workplace. I'm going to be honest with you, with the exception of, say, when I was in the beauty world and when customers would come in, just like with that gentleman, what he experienced with some people not wanting to serve him, I experienced the same thing, where if a customer would come in and they would see me and say they would see a white lady, then they would prefer to go to the white lady because they weren't comfortable with me. And how many times did that happen? Not a lot of times, but I would say about 8%. So that's okay, because if she's not comfortable with me, if she prefers to be with that person, it's better that she goes with that person than to be served by me. And I understood that. And God allowed me, He's given me that kind of insight, that kind of ability to be able to pick up and see that not all things are for one, or because of, say, race, or not all things are because of jealous or what. There are so many different reasons why people come at you the way they come at you, but because of how I was brought up and because of my exposure to things, it has given me the ability to see different aspects, different things. And believe you me, like if I had looked at everything as these people just hate me, that would have affected me very negatively. And that may have taken how I went into the workforce and did things differently. Or if I thought they're doing this because they're all racist against my color, then everything that happened to me, I would have looked at it as racism. But because of my perspective and how I receive things, it has allowed me to be honest in what I'm receiving and then deal with it accordingly. So when I would deal with people, because you deal with difficult people, we do. So then it allowed me to assess, okay, like, how am I going to take this? What am I going to do? So like that gentleman, I did the same thing. When there were people who didn't want to be served by me because of the color of my skin, and it was a very small amount, just like it was with him. Racism, sexism, these things exist all over the world. And it's how you deal with it, which affects how your life will turn. So, I just said, okay, that's fine. But there are many people out there. There were still many people out there who did want my service. And, I had a bevy of people too. Because I had a clientele. I had a huge clientele as well. I was not a pop star, but I had a huge clientele as well. So, because I didn't let that affect me. But had I let that affect me, I would have not had a huge clientele, because I would have approached every client coming in who was not my color, and I would have just said, okay, yeah, they're just not going to want me because of who I am. And I would have had these preconceived notions that they aren't going to accept me. And then they probably wouldn't, because they would have felt that. So my upbringing has allowed me to be able to to receive, it has allowed me to accept people for who they are, but also it has allowed me to see things clearly as to why certain things are happening. The motives behind, certain behaviors, the motives behind people's feelings and their reactions and whatnot. And being a misfit for me really has helped me to be very honest in calling things as I see it, as having the backbone to just really, how can I put it? Really just see things the way they are. So this has allowed me to have conversations with people. That I know they wouldn't have with other people. And some of them they even told me because they wouldn't have that kind of comfort in having conversations, very truthful conversations, because I myself will have I call it as I see it, and I'm not going to say it just because I'm bound to a color or just because I'm bound to a sex or whatnot. I'm going to call it the way I see it. And this is really how you can really build relationships. This is how you can build relationships based on being comfortable speaking with the person that you're dealing with. And if you feel uncomfortable mentioning certain things, and if you feel uncomfortable saying certain things because you know they're going to be offended or you know they're going to get upset, then you're going to hold back. So then there's only so much you're going to want to give. There's only so much, you're not going to allow yourself to get as close because you know that, if they say certain things, then they're going to offend, they're going to turn it. So it's all a matter of perspective and how you look at things. And so I feel that, and I'm saying this about my upbringing because it's basically what is, and I know that this is God. I know that this is something that God wanted for me. At the time, I didn't understand, but now I understand quite clearly that He wanted me to have the kinds of experiences that I've had with the different cultures, different people and different demographics, so that I would be comfortable with different people. So now I'm going deeper now. I'm going to take this deeper. So when I was living in Toronto, and so I was actually living in a hotel. It was a hotel and suites. So I was living there. So it's not like I wasn't paying, hotel price. It was a suite as well. So I was paying rent basically. So at the closing, towards the end of my time, my time living at the suite. And of course, I didn't think I was going to be homeless. I never, even though what was happening is funds were going, like the funds, I was losing money, because I was living off of savings. I was living off my savings that I had built, a savings that I had built for many years. And so when I decided to have, to go full force into my company, give it a shot in January of 2023, I wasn't getting the clients that I was hoping to get. A lot of things were happening. All of you who listen in on my videos, the challenges that I've been having with getting clients and with even getting clients and even with getting employment because of interference. It all started back then. It all started when I was in Toronto. It didn't just start now. It started when I was in Toronto. So everything, I wasn't, it wasn't happening for me. And I thought there was going to be a breakthrough. I thought that God was going to, at the last minute, at the 11th hour, come in with a breakthrough in my favor in that way. It didn't happen. So like in the last, like first it was the death of my mother. I did not expect that. I thought I had her for at least 6 months to a year. I did not expect that death. That pulled the carpet right under my feet. Like I had planned our whole summer together. So that happened in March, and then in June or end of May, then I was on the streets. And like, I really did not see that coming because I was expecting a miracle. I was expecting some kind of miracle to come into my life. And, I was expecting like a client, like, a big deal from a client and everything would be okay. That didn't happen. I became homeless, and it was so funny because like when I became homeless and I slept in my car. Oh no, it was even that day because I knew. So I started, getting rid of stuff. Started getting rid of, excess clothing and like, furniture. I had like equipment for my beauty, my spa business. I had to get rid of all of that. Looking at the time here, so towards the end, I'm like, I can't believe, God, you're not coming through for me. So then when I was actually in my car, I'm like, God, you know what? You didn't discuss this with me. There was at no time in my life you told me that I would actually become homeless. Like, you did not say this. This was not planned. And I do not have a strategy for being homeless. And I remember telling God, what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to eat anything because I do not have a plan. So the only plan I have is to not eat anything and just die here, just die of no food. And then, I felt hope rising, just hope rising in me. And I'm like, no, Holy Spirit, don't you dare, just go push back down. No hope arising, hope arising. So hope just arised in me. And of course, with the hope that was arise and strategy and everything like that came. Then it just became my life of like a journey of being homeless. And so I was homeless in my car until October. Then I was staying with a family for like 6 weeks. And then God told me I had to leave. He told me I had to leave. And so then I went from there to actually, and it was in November. So where I was at the time, I was in St. Catharines, Niagara Falls. So November in St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, freezing. So I remember my first night sleeping outside on a bench, on a very cold bench. And it was like in a school area. So I was sleeping on that bench. And I sat just like I'm sitting here right now. That's how I sat on that bench. And then, of course, my head just kind of like tilted down. And I froze. I was so uncomfortable. But God was basically saying, you're just going to have to suck up. You're just going to have to let comfort go and do this. Like, you're just going to have to do this. Like, this is the best thing for you. From there, there was a community center. They were good. They were open until 9 o'clock. They would give me food. And then from 9, then I started going to my gym. I had a gym in in St. Catharines. And it was open 24 hours, so I would work out at night, and then I would fall asleep on a chair. And I was getting comfortable there, but then God told me I had to go, and I'm like, okay, I have to go. And then the next day, I was so comfortable, I didn't go, and God basically, because I was supposed to go that day. I had tried to go the day before, and I couldn't find, he was telling me he wanted me to get closer to Niagara Falls, because at that time, he had told me that he wanted me to move to the U.S. And so I was waiting for the end of the month to do that, and I was waiting for the end of the month, and he had told me he wanted me to go now. Okay, so then I said, okay, I'm gonna try and do it, but I couldn't get the direction, so I came back to the community center. So that's why, and then I got comfortable, and God basically told me, you got it. And no, but I told God I would try the next day, and then the next day I didn't. The next day I got comfortable, and in that next day, God told me I had to get up and go now. So I had to then make that second attempt to try and do it. And like God scared me. So then I had to do it. So then I made that trek to Niagara Falls. And I came to another, I came to a school. I stayed outside all night. I froze. I stood all night. So I stood about 9, 10 hours. And I froze. And then the school opened up at 6 o'clock. They allowed me in for 2 hours. I was so grateful. And I said to God, God, can I stay here just all day? I'm in Niagara Falls now. He said, no, you got to keep going. And I'm like, no, it's so cold. But I kept going because God told me I had to keep. He goes, and he said to me, he goes, remember our agreement, right? Because I wasn't supposed to stay. Because it wasn't, no, it was Niagara, no, it was still St. Catharines, but no, it was Niagara Falls, but it was close to St. Catharines. So I was now in Niagara Falls, but very close to St. Catharines. So God just said, remember our agreement, because the agreement was I was supposed to get to the falls. That's where he was aiming me. He wanted me to be at the falls. So he said, remember our agreement. So I'm like, yeah. So, okay, because I was out there all night. I froze. It was freezing and I stood. So I didn't sleep all night and I slept for 2 hours on that beach, on that bench in that college. And they were going to let me stay there longer. But God was like, no, remember our agreement. So then because of that, then I kept going, I kept walking. And then this lady, she was driving by. I don't want to go too much into this, but the lady was driving by. And she said, and I'm walking on the highway. I'm walking on the highway because I'm just going by directions on what I have, And I told her, no, I'm good, because I don't want to take a drive with a stranger. And so she went, and I kept walking. Half an hour later, she came back and she said, I just came back. God just gave me some kind of message, and I didn't tell her anything about God. But she said, where are you going? She said to me, and I told her where I'm going, and she said to me, there's no way you're going to make it. It'll be like 8 hours. So let me drive you there. And then, the Holy Spirit just said, go. So then as we're talking, we actually, I don't know her, but we actually know each other from when I was living in St. Catharines. So we talked at the community center, so I actually knew her. We knew each other, but we didn't pick that up at the time until I got in the car. So she bought me food and she took me to a community center. Now I'm very close to the falls, and so I'm like, okay. And so I'm at the falls, and I slept outside again for another night. And let me tell you, homeless in a car is very homeless. It's very different from being homeless outside. Very, very different. You can blend into society. When you're in a car, you can turn your heat up at night. When you're in a car, you have like a place of shelter. But when you're homeless on the streets, you're walking around carrying bags, and you're living outside. It's completely different. And a completely different psychological effect on you. So anyway, so at the falls, so I slept one night outside in a bus, like a bus shelter. Then the next day I'm in a community center, and God said, you need to leave now. You need to get out. You need to go right now. You need to go. And I'm like, God, but I'm going this week. You need to go now. It was on a Sunday. And I had no money. I had 7 American pennies. I remember I had 7 American pennies. And so I did the thing, I did what God asked me to do. And I went across the border, gave them my story about, coming into U.S. I mean, I didn't give this story, but I gave them a story, this is, I'm coming here. I let them know and everything. And so, I had all my papers and whatnot. And so then they let me go through. I went to the American border. They let me go through, and so because God said that because God basically said He wanted me to start my life in the U.S. because He had a life for me in the U.S. because He said in Canada I don't have a life for you there anymore. yeah, my life for you is in the U.S. So then I crossed the border, and you know what? I'm going to tell you, like I walked across. Like I walked across. They have a section, 6,000 people. 6,000 people a year from Canada to the U.S. actually walk, so they don't drive, they walk. And there's the border. You have to go to the U.S. for it. You still have to do anything. You have to pay $1, like the whole thing. Like someone actually paid for me, and it was so amazing. It felt so good. But the reason why I share this story is because it's going to get even rougher. So now I'm in the U.S. I'm somewhere where I've never been, and I've never, as living, I've visited America many times, but to actually, build a life here. So to kind of abbreviate this, I was in Buffalo for a few days. Then from Buffalo, I went to New York City. Thought New York was going to be the place at first, and then I thought it was going to be Atlanta second. So I thought I would be in New York for a while. I thought maybe a year or 2 year, a year, like a while, and then I thought I'd go to Atlanta. But I went to Atlanta because for a week I was in New York. Went to Atlanta for a year, and even though I stayed in like temporary shelter for in Atlanta, I did spend a lot of time living outside too. In the beginning, not inside and outside, in the rain. In the rain, I spent time living outside, and God was so good because it was like in Atlanta, I can't even say it. Like a downpour of rain, a downpour, like heavy, heavy downpouring of rain. And this goes on for hours. He was so good. He allowed me, he gave me the grace to stay at a building where there were security guards that actually would allow me to stay, like not outside, but not inside, but outside, where there was a barrier protecting me from the rain, and I could sleep there at night. Because they didn't have to do that. They could have kicked me off, but God softened their heart to have mercy on me. When it was raining, when it was the torrential. And watch me, when I get off, I can say the word. I can say it. I really can, but I can't say it right now. So lots of rain, and God, softened their heart for to allow that. I did stay in shelters a couple of times, but God had me move from those shelters. He'd tell me that I'd have to go, and then I had to go, and I just kept like wandering. And I was getting upset with God. I was getting so upset with God, and like I would, I would lash out at Him at times, and like tell Him how tired I am, and everything, like because I didn't, like I was tired. I was tired of constantly the moving and the moving, like getting in somewhere and then the moving and then the getting in somewhere and then the moving, and it's like what is going on? And and especially when I first went to the U.S. and I think it was like 3 weeks in Atlanta, and my goodness, I smelled because I didn't have a shower. I'm telling you, you know what? If a skunk came across me, they would have ran away from me because of the smell. Like it wouldn't have been me running away from them. They would have ran away from me because of my smell. That's how bad it was. And then having the rain come on me in that smell, in that uncleanness and that unbathed. And so I was so, like God just had me just the moving, and it's like, like as soon as I got comfortable, and then I got to, and then after July, after I had stayed in a shelter, then I was outside. I was living outside for the longest time. I knew, like at that, I had accepted that. I mean, as it is, what can I do? But I understand that God had, purpose in all of that. Like I knew that there was a purpose. There was something that he was working out, and it was very uncomfortable for me. So it was very uncomfortable. It was very, very hard. It was very, very difficult. And I talked to him about it, and I told him, I told him I'm tired, and everything, like I would tell him, I would get upset with him, I would get mad at him, but of course I would always come back and I would apologize, because God is always right, and God is never wrong. And So then after, yeah, but I would always, but it was hard. And the point I'm leading to here is that there were so many opportunities for compromise for me. There were, let me tell you, like even when I was in Toronto, there were so many opportunities. Like when um, I had, when money was going, like Satan has a way of always trying to compromise. But my point in the whole matter is it's a matter of perspective. And if you place God on the throne of your life, um, then you will resist the compromise. Because if you're looking straight at God, and if you're depending on Him, and if you've died to yourself, then you die to your selfish needs. So things like money, things like shelter, things like clothing, things like all the things that we want and that we feel we should have, and honestly, things that God wants for us. But maybe for some of us, it may not be that time. And so if God says, okay, you know what, look to me, let me do it my way. My way is the only way. Any other way, you're doomed. And so, me just having the spirit of saying, no, I'm doing this God's way. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. The compromise that the things that I faced when I was in Atlanta, people, like some people, there are a lot of smooth people. I encountered a lot of smooth people with smooth words. And it was just like, no, like God would just allow me to see through everything. It's just like, no. And, like, no. And they would look at me like I was crazy, and like some of them, they would come to me when I'm on the street sleeping and they'd say things like, you know what, you don't look like you belong here. You don't look like this. You don't look like the type of person who should be homeless. And then they would make these compromises and everything. It's like, no, you know what? I'm cool here. I'm cool sleeping on this cold bench in the cold weather or in the rainy weather. I'm just going to do this God's way. I may not look like I belong here. Thank you very much for the compliment, but I'm just going to do this God's way. And so you get, like I said, some of them were smooth, like wrapped up in nice, boxes with pretty bows. And then others are, pretty blunt and blatant. And it was like, whoa, that's bold. But compromise here, there, and everywhere. And let me tell you, if it were okay, if the weakness were money, I would have did it. If the weakness were comfort, I would have did it. If the weakness was like just if the weakness was emotions, I would have did it. I would have went that way. And that's like, and Satan looks for things like that. Satan looks for any kind of foothold he can get, and he will use that to destroy you. So if you love money, he's going to find a way to get money in there to destroy you. If he knows that you're looking for companionship, you hate being alone, you need friends and all this and that, then he's going to use that weakness to bring you down. If, for example, it is comfort that you are looking for, like if I was, and I did want comfort, then he will use that. Like if I were to say, you know what, God, I can't do this. Like, I just can't do this. I can't, just be, lay on these benches and sit on these benches and sleep here all night and everything like that. If I succumbed to that, then when someone offered me an opportunity for comfort, I would have took that comfort. So it is dying to yourself. And trusting God and trusting what it is that He has for you. And so that's basically, and that's what I'm trying to say basically with this, is that I had to push my wants and my needs aside and trust God and trust what it was that he was doing in my life. And from that, from all of that, like I said, and my time in Atlanta was like, my goodness, was such an education. The exposure that I had to so many different people, and the exposure that I had to the Black community, quite frankly, because like I said, we have Black people in Canada. We do. We have a lot of Black people in Toronto. Percentage-wise, maybe not as much as in New York, and most definitely not as much as there is in Atlanta. But we do have that. But for me to be placed in that and to be surrounded by that, and then to have that exposure to that culture, and then to have the exposure, not only that, to the demographics of homelessness, and really and truly, homeless people who are homeless, it's just a lower income bracket. That's all it is. It's just a lower income bracket. So it is a journey just like any other journeys. And I'm going to tell you, there are far worse things that can happen to a person than being homeless. I have learned so much, and I understood even greater than, even more than that, why God allowed this to happen to me was A, to toughen me. I'm going to give you a couple examples of that. Was A, to toughen me, B, to educate me, and C, to expand my territory of people, demographics, and being able to understand them and relate to them and connect with them. So it's all a matter of perspective. Had I looked at it differently, would have definitely had a different outcome in my life, and I most definitely would not be here right now doing this video. Now, as for some examples, like with especially, and then toughening is one, because I was just like one of these little, almost like frail people, like people, and they still do. They still think that I'm like just like a pushover, and that someone, that they can just step on and, like just walk over. This is what people think of me. And you know what? Not all reason, more power to them, because you know what? If you come across looking like that, then people are going to let their guard down, and then I'm actually going to learn more. People can think what they want about me. They want to think that I'm frail, if they want to think that I'm stupid, if they want to think that I'm ignorant, by all means do so, because I am none of those. And you just help me to learn more about you, because usually what happens is people let their guard down. And when you're letting your guard down with someone who you think is not bright, or who you think is not sharp, or who you think is weak, they're picking up on everything. They're picking up on things you don't want them to pick up on. So I say this. So like I said, a couple of things. Which I surprise myself, and this, God allows this. Sleeping on the benches and sleeping in certain places, and I would go to public places and sleep because I'm a woman, and I would never stretch out because I never wanted to feel that kind of vulnerability. So I would always sit like this and then hunch over. And one night, as I was waking up out of my sleep, I felt a hand on my butt. So I woke up out of my sleep. I was so tired. And I just kind of took a side look to see who it was. Of course, it was a man. And he had his hand just squeezing my butt. I was so tired. I just said to him after I looked at him, and then I kind of turned back like this. And I said in the G-rated version, "Get your hands off my butt." I didn't say it in the G-rated version. Actually, I'm giving you the G-rated version. I did not say it in the G-rated version. The butt was an A word. So I said, "Get your hands off my butt." I just said nicely, "Get your hands off my butt." And he said, "I thought my hands belonged here." And I said, and I raised my voice a few tones more, and I said, "Get your hands off my butt." So he did. And then he walked away. And then I went back to sleep. And my reaction surprised me, because normally I probably would have went, "Ah!" screaming, like run, get him, which I did. There was another time when someone tried to grab me, like I was sleeping, someone tried to grab my bag, I don't know, tried to grab my bag or my butt or whatnot, and it was like a bush, so like a bench, like a circular bench, and then there was like a whole bunch of plants there in the middle. And so he was on one side and he crawled into the bush, and I don't know if he was trying to grab, it felt like he was trying to grab I don't know, purse, whatnot. And I woke up and I felt it, and I took my purse and I started hitting and hitting and hitting and hitting. I thought, get away, get away, get away. And so my reaction to these things were so out of character to how I would have normally responded maybe 3-4 years ago. So I saw the evolution and I saw the toughening that God was doing to me, and even how I would speak out to some of these people, because some of these people are hard. Like some of the people that I'm meeting, they're tough people, and I would just like lash out. Like if they tried to do a certain thing or say a certain thing, do certain things, especially to me, like I would just lash out at them. I mean, and don't get me wrong, there were times when God would just tell me, shut up. Sometimes they were hard people. So God is just like, keep your mouth shut. Just don't say anything. So then those were those times when I just, I was warned not to say anything, so I wouldn't. But I say this, because there was a time when, like it was just, and I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why all of that, like he had to have me go through all of that. So when he told me I had to come to New York, I'm like, oh gosh, no, no, because I told him like how I was feeling about the situation I was in there. I was telling him how I felt about that. And so he told me to go to New York. But he had me come to New York to take me out of that situation. And I didn't see that at that time. So I'm like, I thought it was going to be just more of the same. And but I had talked to him so much about the situation. Okay, thank you. I gotta go. So much about that situation that he answered my prayers by having me move to New York. I mean, he had planned to have me move to New York anyway, but that was basically what he was doing. So he was taking me out of that situation of going. And by having me come to New York, he in a sense he answered my prayer, because I kept saying, like, I'm tired of this, like I'm tired of this, like I need a place where I can settle, I need a place where I can get some root, I need a place where I can grow. And like I was taking all of that to him. And so but I thought it was going to be in Atlanta. So when he said, I want you to go to New York, I didn't, like it was kind of resistant, but I listened. And so when you die to yourself, you become obedient to God. That's when he can do a work in your life. I wanted to read scripture. I am renting this, renting this room. I have booked space for this room. Somebody just came by and said, Sheen said she's going to give me 5 minutes to do this. So I'm going to really try and wrap this up here. I wanted to read scripture. I wanted to read Philippians 4:11, where Paul talks about he's content in when he had and when he didn't have. And basically that's what's happened to me, is being content in all situations. And how you look at the perspective, your perspective in life determines in what direction you go. So if you give everything to God, and if you look up at God and do it his way, then you are guaranteed the life that he has promised you. But when you try to take things into your own hands, and when you want to go your way, then that's going to lead to disaster. So life really is a matter of perspective, And when you are on a journey with God, when you are living for God, it's all about dying to self 100% completely. And so things that you desire, you have to put them to death in yourself and allow Him to lead you in the course that He has for you. And if these are the things He wants for you, He'll give them to you. I mean, like, He wants us to live in safety. He wants us to live in peace. He wants us to have money. He wants us to have jobs. He wants us, but He's going to do it His way. It's going to be His way and not our way. And if we try to do it our way, then we're not going to be successful in the way we try to do it. If He wants it for you, He will give it to you. But it's going to be in His way, and it's not going to be in your own strength. And so that's all I have to say. I could have went on with this one, but I have to respect my time here. That's all I have to say on. It is always it's a matter of perspective. I had a few. So Philippians 4:11. I also had 11:23-30. This is in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians 6:4-8. 2 Corinthians. Give God a year of your life. If you're not a Christian, 1 year of your life, I guarantee you will never want to go back to the way you've lived before. Until again, God bless. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Okay. Bye. Mwah.